Shemel Shah. Yahweh Shemel Shah. Barakatah Yahweh Shah. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh. Barakatah Yahweh Shah.
It's about time, man, because I'm ready to go home. I'm ready to get the kingdom. I'm ready to live. I'm ready to breathe fresh. I'm ready to have beautiful, pure women, okay? Not no strawberry harlots on this side. Ready to have children, man, you can vibe with, okay? Be around brothers. Be around the Lord himself, okay? I'm ready to go and visit places in the galaxy that we didn't know exist.
The nebula is parting before us. Indeed, set course for that star cluster. Engaging now.
All right, I'm ready to walk on sandy beaches, man, and explore the ocean floors. I'm ready to fly. Okay, I'm ready to eat real food. Okay, I'm ready to drive a chariot, man. All right, I'm ready to minister unto the Lord and to be ministered to, man. Okay, I'm ready to worship Yahweh Shai in its full entirety. Okay, I'm ready for it. We're ready, man. I'm ready to see angels and greet angels.
And we know the scriptures say we shall prophesy in part and we shall know in part. But then when he that is come, we shall know all things in full. I'm not quoting it verbatim, but pretty much when Yahweh shall return on the earth, all the secrets of the universe, we gonna know all that, you know, when the Heavenly Father changes us. Like I was telling the brothers when we was at camp, our lives that we experiencing right now, the very little life that we living right now, this very moment is a small dust in the eyes of the Father. It's a small speck in the eyes of our existence. Man, we finna live, bro. Hey, man, Yahweh Shema Shah give us life. Check finna live, man.
All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Mukakwadash, and double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples to us younger brothers. And peace and blessings and salutations to the Hopeful Lake out there pushing this word in truth and in sincerity across the four winds in the name of Yahweh Bashim Al Shah, pushing to get up out there. Shalom to the Hopeful Lake, the believers, the listeners whom have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh Bashim Al Shah. All right, and what I want to go into today is another continuation. All right, another lesson continuing on in the book of Acts. You know, we made it to, the latter chapters, as Apostle Paul has now been, apprehended, by Roman, the Roman government, and what you have is Jake, still trying to make a case, to have the Apostle Paul put to death. That was the end game for Jake, you see, and just as they wanted to do away with Yahweh Shai, they had this same spirit, these wicked niggas had that same spirit toward the followers of Yahweh Shai. And they especially had a problem with the Apostle Paul for teaching two Israelite foreigners. And then Jake was condemned because those Israelite foreigners, they had the spirit to believe, they had faith. So Jake was condemned on that aspect. And in their mind, if they could just get rid of the Apostle Paul, they could stop the word. But it don't work like that. The ministry ain't based on one man. That's what, wicked niggas didn't understand. In their mind, if they got rid of one man, they see what happened when they tried that with Yahweh Shai. All right, the gospel only magnified and Yahweh Shai was resurrected. That death was overturned. Just like those that have to die in Yahweh Shai in this time, that death gonna be overturned. Esau in these latter days, he thinks that, he can, just unalive the prophets. Then the word stops. Then the truth stops. It don't work like that, man. The truth ain't don't rest on a few brothers. You get rid of a few men free prophets, okay, then you just stop the truth. You stop prophecy. It don't work like that. Okay? And see, everyone, is going to have to come to the realization that the will of the Lord is going to be carried out, regardless, man. You see? So let's get into it. Let's go to the NLT. This is all right. This is the book of Acts, chapter 23, and verse 1. It says, "And Paul earnestly beholding the council," so he's still trying to plead, with his kinsmen. So now he's amongst the Sanhedrin, the high priest, the chief priest, the rest of the Sadducees and Pharisees. So he's amongst the chief priests, okay, pleading his case. So when you read he's in Roman custody, all right, the soldiers, have him in custody, Roman soldiers, okay, but he's appealing, okay, to what they call the Sanhedrin, okay, which are the top priests, the high priests, okay, and certain top Pharisees. It says, "And Paul earnestly beholding the council said, Men and brethren, I have lived in all good conscience before the Most High until this day. And the high priest Ananias commanded them that stood by him to smite him on the mouth. Then said Paul unto him, The Most High shall smite thee, thou whited wall. For sittest thou to judge me after the law, and commandest me to be smitten contrary to the law?" So the high priest, wanted the Apostle Paul smitten, slap him in the mouth, which was a major insult, okay, when you go into the customs of the East. Okay, so Paul is like, you're being a hypocrite, because you want me struck for nothing at all, because he didn't do nothing against the law to deserve to be struck. Okay, and it says, "Those standing near Paul said to him, Do you dare insult the Most High's high priest?" "I'm sorry, brothers. I didn't realize he was the high priest," Paul replied, "for the scriptures say you must not speak evil of any of your rulers." So Paul, he humbled down, when he learned that was the high priest, okay, because certain laws, okay, you had to treat the priest with a different type of reverence. Here it is, the high priest demands a certain type of reverence, but then when it comes to Yahushua, he's just another Israelite. Okay, with the high priest office of Yahushua, the order of Melchizedek is far above the high priest office of the Levites. Okay, so there was laws concerning, reverence, and this was when, to put it in context, which Paul still, he humbly, reverenced. Once he learned that was the high priest, he humbly, reverenced it. Okay, he stood down. You see, but when you go into the context, you go into the Old Testament, the high priest, okay, they were selected by Yahweh Bashim Al-Shah, the Heavenly Father, ordained men to be high priests of their lineage of Aaron. Okay, there was a certain lineage that came from Aaron that the Lord ordained, to be those high priests. And by the time you get to the book of the New Testament, okay, when you go into the Gospels and the epistles and Acts, the high priest is a political office, okay, which it was selected by the Roman government. Okay, it was highly corrupted. Okay, but still in all, the Apostle Paul, he pays reverence, to that office, and he stands down. Even though their office was highly corrupt at this time, their high priest office, man. Okay, so reading on, it said, Paul realizes that some members of the high council were Sadducees and some were Pharisees. So he shouted, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee, as were my ancestors, and I am on trial because my hope in the resurrection is in the resurrection of the dead." Okay, this divided the council, the Pharisees against the Sadducees, For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection or angels or spirits, but the Pharisees believe in all of these. So you had the Pharisees and Sadducees. They was in agreement when it came to condemning Yahushua, and there was an agreement when it came to condemning, all right, the apostles, the followers of Yahushua. But they didn't agree on particular points in their own doctrine. Okay, and the Apostle Paul knew that, him being a Pharisee, so he mentioned, the resurrection, and it caused them to argue, man. It caused them to be divided amongst each other. Okay, and it was a strategy, man, because the Apostle Paul, the Spirit was on Apostle Paul, because these niggas weren't right in what they were trying to do. Okay, and them niggas was reaching, trying to find any, avenue that they could use to put the Apostle Paul to death wrongfully, man. So he played on their, the internal differences dealing with the resurrection. Okay, and when you go into it, let's go here real quick. There's Matthew, because when you go into a resurrection, which when you go into an Adam online, it means thing rise. Okay, thing rise, and then going to back. Okay, to rise again. Thing rise again. Which, matter of fact, I'm gonna get the elder. We went into this before. The beloved elder brother Yashua Wamba, has lessons, recent lessons going into this. Okay, well, just to get an understanding dealing with the Sadducees, because the Sadducees really didn't believe in too much of nothing. There was some Hellenized priests. Whenever you go into it, the Sadducees were basically Hellenized priests. Okay, so let's go here. But before that, let's get resurrection real quick. So let's just pull this up, because there's different contexts, when dealing with this word resurrection. The most famous one, of course, is the resurrection of Yahushua. Okay, him being crucified. Okay, put into a tomb or sepulcher. Okay, and then rising back to life, their spirit coming back into their body. Okay, that was crucified, and him being resurrected, and eventually taken, to the Father. Okay, so you have that, form of resurrection, which that's the resurrection in which the doctrine, is based on. Yahushua rising again, his death was a sacrifice of sin. Okay, and his resurrection was us rising back to glory. Because as he was resurrected, brought back to life, he was eventually taken back to his glory. Okay, and that's the process we go through as we die to this old world. We begin to rise to our glory all the way until we're changed when those chariots come. Okay, and we're taking off in those chariots, man. Okay, and you have those that physically die for Yahushua, and they're going to be resurrected and risen to their glory. So Yahushua, what he did was practical and also a shadow, all right, of things to come for the body. What his body went through, what the body of the church went through that as well. Okay, now, let's see. It says a rising again from the dead. Okay, it says to rise again, to lift oneself up, to appear again, to be restored. Okay, so you have, their spirit being restored to their body for it to live again. You have to appear again, which is reincarnation. Okay, and also the spirit, because it says this is from all right, again, okay, or surgery, which is to rise. All right, to rise again. Okay, So you have, during death, the spirit, it rises to the Father. Okay, and see, the Sadducees, they didn't believe in any aspect of resurrection. Okay, these niggas was basically, all right, Hellenized, man, Hellenized priests. You know, when you just really go into the Sadducees and their doctrine, because they were living it up in the Roman Empire. All right, so let me look this up real quick, see what it say. Sad. So I'm gonna ask you, were the Sadducees were the most Hellenized of the sects of the priests? See what it give us in the chat. So let's go here. Just do a little history on the Sadducees. So I'll just ask the chat real quick, could so I asked the chat, were the Sadducees the most Hellenized of the six, all right, of the priests, So when you go into a short answer, yes, with caveats, you can say that the Sadducees were the most Hellenized of the Israelite priestly sects, as long as you mean culturally and politically rather than theologically Greek. It says why that claim makes sense. It says social position. The Sadducees were drawn from the Jerusalem priestly aristocracy, the temple elite who worked closely with the ruling powers. First, the Seleucids, okay, going all the way back to Jason. And so the Sadducees was founded in wickedness, man, because the high priest was of the sect of the Sadducees. Okay, remember Jason, okay, he set his brother on Ananias, okay, to be put to death so he can have the high priest office, man, granted to him by the Seleucid Empire under Antiochus, man, Epiphanes, man, the damn demon of demons. Okay, so you go back to the Seleucid Empire, well, that takes you back to Jason, man, that wicked nigga. Okay, so the Sadducees, their beginning, all right, their origins is rooted in pure wickedness, man. It said later the Hasmoneans, then Rome. It said that alone pushed them towards Hellenistic norms, political pragmatism. They were comfortable operating with Hellenistic style governance and later Roman administration, unlike groups that resisted foreign influence, and the Pharisees, they heavily resisted foreign influence. Okay, so they didn't even agree. There was a sharp disagreement between the Pharisees and Sadducees. Pharisees was over righteous. Okay, they're flawed that they will be doing too much in the law, adding to the law. Okay, and the Sadducees, them niggas were just lax. They were chilling. They was a Greek fraternity, man, with fringes on. Okay, it says cultural openness. Compared to the Pharisees or Essenes, they appear less, all right, resistant to Greek cultural influence, especially in education, legal reasoning, and elite lifestyle, man. Them niggas were living it up with these Romans, man, with these Edomites. Okay? They was amongst the higher ups, man. They was a part of these elite networks, man, in Rome. Okay? It says spiritual stance. It said their focus on the written Torah alone, rejecting later interpretive traditions, aligns with a more conservative text center elite, ironically similar to how Hellenistic elites treated foundational laws. Okay, so these niggas was Hellenized, man. You know, and they was rubbing elbows with these Roman elites. Okay, and so the Sadducees, you know, became likened into a black, you know, boule amongst Jake, man. Okay, but they didn't believe in anything basically. Okay, so let's go back to the book of Matthew. All right, so Paul, the apostle Paul, he understands, you know, the eternal strife between these two sects. So he brings up the resurrection, and these niggas go at each other. Okay, so it says, it's in Matthew. I go back to Acts. I wouldn't get that in Matthew, but I think the point was made on that. But let's go back to the book of Acts, chapter 23. Okay, starting at verse 8. It said, "For the Sadducees say there is no resurrection or angels or spirits, but the Pharisees believe in all of these. So there was a great uproar. Some of the teachers of religious law, who were Pharisees, jumped up and began to argue forcefully. 'We see nothing wrong with him,' they shouted. 'Perhaps a spirit or angel spoke to him.'" So some of the Pharisees agreed, you know, about his testimony concerning how Yahweh Shai, you know, came unto him. Okay, his road to Damascus story. Okay, so some of the Pharisees agreed. All right, but the Sadducees, they didn't believe in any type of resurrection at all. Okay, so there was a major discrepancy, man. There was a dispute between them. As the conflict grew more violent, the commander was afraid they would tear Paul apart, so he ordered his soldiers to go and rescue him by force and take him back to the fortress. Okay, so this caused, you know, another uproar, another riot. Okay, and the Roman officials went, you know, and got Apostle Paul, you know, because he was a Roman citizen, so, you know, he was being protected, okay, by Roman military, man. You see, so the Lord set it up to where you know, Rome was a tool used to protect the Apostle Paul from these niggas, man. Hey, the Lord is going to protect us in a lot of different ways coming up, man. You know, that's why we can't put the Most High in the box when it comes to how, you know, he's going to deliver us from, you know, these situations, man. Even the scriptures say, "For man's ways please the Lord, he make even his enemies be at peace with him," man. Okay? And this is why the Apostle Paul would always push, you know, be at peace, if possible, be at peace with all men. Okay? We don't just go through the earth, you know, making new enemies every day out here wilding because, you know, we got the truth, and, you know, so we just out here wild and making new enemies. We out here reckless, you know. Nah, man, we move with wisdom. We move with humility, man. Okay? And we let the Lord do what he gonna do, man. Moving in wisdom, you know, it keeps us, you know, in a position of favor, man. Moving in humility, okay? Because this wisdom we have isn't to, like I say, to be reckless or try to be condescending, okay? But to walk around puffed up. You see, this wisdom is for us to be solid, man. Okay? To be an example of what, you know, we teach, man. Okay? Moving with integrity, and you know, because integrity is universal, man. Even to people that don't believe, they recognize integrity. You know, they recognize humility. Okay? They recognize honesty. They recognize certain traits that we have, you know, that which wisdom requires us to walk in these things. These things are universal, man. Okay, and Paul had a good name. Okay, so now you see, you know, the Lord is activating, the Roman, military, all right, these Roman officers to be a shield unto Paul from these wicked niggas, man. Okay. It says, that night the Lord appeared to Paul and said, be encouraged, Paul, just as you have been witness to me in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well. Because the teachings of the Apostle Paul, made it to the palace eventually. These teachers made it to the palace of Caesar. You had certain officials, okay, within the palace of Caesar that was being converted, man. Certain Jake, showing that Jake was everywhere, man. Jake always had different high offices amongst the Roman, you know. These were Jakes that wasn't, practicing Israelites, but they was, let me see, amongst the ranks, okay, in Rome. So you had palace guards, that was Jake. And you go back to Rome, okay. Um, yep, here we go. Just for Philippians 1 and 12. Okay, it says, now I want you to know, my dear brothers and sisters, that everything happened to me here has helped to spread the good news. For everyone here, including the whole palace guard, knows that I'm in chains because of Hamashiach. Okay? So it said the whole palace guard, okay? What they call the Praetorian Guard, and that was like the special forces, right, that protected Caesar. Okay? They will protect, whoever was the Caesar, the emperor. Okay, the Praetorian Guard, you can read up on them. So the word had made it all the way up into the Praetorian Guard. Okay, it says, and because of my imprisonment, most of the believers here have gained confidence and boldly spoke, all right, and boldly speak the Most High's message without fear. Okay, so this was later on after the book of Acts when Paul finally makes it to, all right, to Rome. Okay, and he's been held, in Caesar's palace. Okay, and I believe at the time, the Rome during the letter of Philippians, let's look it up real quick. I mean, the Caesar, it was either Claudius or Nero. Let me see. Paul wrote a book of Philippians. Yeah, it was Nero. Yep. Just a quick look up. So they say, yeah, Nero Claudius Caesar was a Roman emperor when Paul wrote the book of Philippians around 60 to 62 AD while in prison in Rome. Paul was under house arrest during this period, and his reference to those of Caesar households refers to servants or officials within Nero's court. Okay, so the word had gotten all the way up into servants and officials in Nero's court. Okay, you said it says Caesar's household. It said the letter notes that believers in the household of Caesar sent greetings indicating the spread of Christianity to Nero's own palace, man. The Lord was working a mighty work through the apostle, man. Okay, so that's why when you go to the book of Acts, how shall I let him know that he let him know this was the end of his road, you know. So I told him be of good courage, tell them, look, these niggas can't do, these niggas ain't gonna get to you. You got other things I need you to do. Okay. So these niggas can't do nothing with you. All right. And it says, I'll read verse 11 again. It says, That night the Lord appeared to Paul and said, "Be encouraged, Paul. Just as you have been a witness to me here in Jerusalem, you must preach the good news in Rome as well." Okay, and we just went into that. That was fulfilled. Okay, and it says the next morning a group of Jews got together and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. And that was so wicked for them niggas to do that. And Paul did nothing worthy of death. Okay, according to the law. So they went before the Most High and made a vow. Because when you make a vow, you're making the Most High a witness. Okay, and what you're saying you're gonna do. That's why Elder Apostle, Elder Yashawamba, he went into that about just making these random vows, man. You don't want to just play with vows. You and your emotions, and you make a vow. You have a bad hangover. Okay, and then you make a vow, I'm not gonna drink ever again into the kingdom. You don't want to do that. Okay, because you're in the moment. Okay, now whatever vow you make is between you and the Most High. Okay, but you don't want to just make it a habit till you tie yourself to all these different vows. Okay, you argue with your woman, or you fall out with a woman, and now you make a vow not to deal with women. They might not be your lot. It could be. Okay, but just be mindful. That's the gist of it. Because your vow is your vow between you and the Most High. Okay, but just know that vow is serious, and you don't want to put yourself in the box making a vow because you feel some type of emotion in the moment. Be mindful of vows, man. But these niggas are so wicked. They're making a vow to the Most High to do wickedness, man. They're making a vow to murder, to break a commandment. You see? That's how wicked and blinded these niggas are, man. That's how unreasonable niggas are, man. Okay? It says the next morning a group of Jews got together and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed the Apostle Paul. And then that's proud too. How the Lord gonna allow you to do that? That's like them also making a guarantee, like they finna do this. Okay? It says they went to the leading priests and elders and told them, "We have bound ourselves with an oath to eat nothing until we have killed Paul. So you and the high council should ask the commander to bring Paul back to the council again. Pretend you want to examine his case more fully. We will kill him on the way." So these wicked niggas had set up a whole plot. They have this whole wicked plot that they set up and bound themselves to, dealing with the Apostle Paul, what they was going to do, what they planned on doing to him. Okay? So they was going to act like they wanted to examine his case again, and when he was going to be escorted back to the Sanhedrin, they was going to ambush him and unalive him, man. Okay? And that's straight murder. That would have been straight murder, man. And that's the vow they made, the oath they made. Okay? Acts 23:16, it said, "But Paul's nephew, his sister's son, heard of their plan and went to the fortress and told Paul." So the Lord had it to where Paul's nephew heard. So he had, Apostle Paul would have the ups. It said, Paul called for one of the Roman officers and said, take this young man to the commander. He has something important to tell him. So the officer did, explaining, "Paul, the prisoner, called me over and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you." The commander took his hand and led him aside and asked, "What is it you want to tell me?" Paul's nephew told him, some Jews are going to ask you to bring Paul before the high council tomorrow, pretending they want to get some more information. But don't do it. There are more than 40 men hiding along the way, ready to ambush him. They have vowed not to eat or drink anything until they have killed him. They are ready now, just waiting for your consent. Okay, so Paul's nephew tells, the commander, okay, the man that's in charge of, these Roman soldiers, okay, about the plot of these wicked niggas, man. Okay, so he tells him, tells Paul's nephew, look, don't let anyone know you told me this. The commander warned the young man. Then the commander called 2 of his officers and ordered, get 200 soldiers ready to leave for Caesarea at 9 o'clock tonight. Also take 200 spearmen and 70 mounted troops. Provide horses for Paul to ride and get him to safety to Governor Felix. Then he wrote this letter to the governor. Okay, so now you have 470 men, plus spearmen, okay, mounted troops, it's a little cavalry. Okay, so now there's a hedge around the Apostle Paul, man. It comes from Yahweh Bashim Al-Shai. There was a Lord hedging the Apostle Paul. And the Lord could have did it in many ways, but that's the way he chose to do it. Okay? He said, provide horses for Paul to ride and get him safety to Governor Felix. And Governor Felix, he's in the office of Pilate. This is after, Pilate's, term is up. Okay? And you will have a few intern governors that will come down, and then Felix, is in that office now. This is the same office that Pilate had. Okay? So they're sending the Apostle Paul to Pilate. He said, then he wrote this letter to the governor from Claudius Lysias to his excellency, Governor Felix, greetings. This man was seized by some Jews, and they were about to kill him when I arrived with the troops. When I learned that he was a Roman citizen, I removed him to safety. Then I took him to their high council to try to learn the basis of his accusations against him. I soon discovered the charge was something regarding their religious law, certainly nothing worthy of imprisonment or death. Okay, and there was the Lord working through, okay, even though the Roman, okay, system, okay, to have Saul pardoned from them wicked accusations from them niggas, man. Okay, so the Roman officials, they saw nothing worthy of death or imprisonment. Okay, it said, but when I was informed of a plot to kill him, I immediately sent him on to you. I have told his accusers to bring their charges before you. Okay, so now it says, so that night, as ordered, the soldiers took Paul as far as Antipatris. They returned to the fortress the next morning, while the mounted troops took him on to Caesarea. When they arrived in Caesarea, they presented Paul and the letter to the governor Felix. He read it and then asked Paul what province was he from, and he said Cilicia. Paul answered, I will hear your case myself when your accusers arrive. The governor told him. Then the governor ordered him kept in the prison at Herod's headquarters. So Paul is still being held, okay, by the Roman authorities. Okay, and now his case, okay, dealing with these niggas have made it all the way to the governor, man. Similar to Yahweh Shai. Okay. So that's the conclusion of that. All right, that's the end of the Acts chapter 23. So just wanted to get into that. So Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters edified. Till next time, I'll say shalom.